February 18th, 2013 City Council meeting. Tonight we're privileged to have from St. Anastasia Father Eric Fedewa, who will lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, we come before you this evening to ask that you would be with us, especially to lead and guide all of those here present who have been placed by the people in their positions to serve this city of Troy. We ask that you would be with them, always guide their decisions according to what is true and what is right and good. We ask that you bestow your Holy Spirit and that gift of wisdom upon them and protect them from all temptation to do anything other than the good. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. February 18th, 2013 City Council meeting is called to order. We have the roll call, please, Ms. Bidner.
Mayor Slater? Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Here.
Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Thank you. We have two absent. Would someone like to move a resolution to excuse Mayor Slater and Councilman Teets? Councilman McGinnis.
Resolve that Troy City Council hereby excuses the absence of Mayor Dane Slater and Councilman Doug Teets at the regular City Council meeting of February 18th, 2013.
Motion's been made by Councilman McGinnis and seconded by Councilman Campbell. In discussion? Vote. Mr. Bidner?
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. We have three presentations tonight. The first one is C1, Smart Investing at Your Library, presented by Kathy Russ, our library director. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm so excited that I can finally end the suspense and tell you about this grant. So here we go. The Troy Public Library has been awarded a $65,175 grant from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, also known as FINRA, the Investor Education Foundation, and the American Library Association as part of the nationwide Smart Investing at Your Library program. The Troy Public Library was one of 14 public libraries nationwide chosen through a competitive process to receive this grant. Our program is called Financial Planning for Your College Future, and it's designed to help high school students and their parents to establish a financial plan for college and beyond. The project addresses saving and investing to cover college expenses, as well as the skills and knowledge students need to manage their finances well in college and after they graduate. The sessions will begin with a focus on financial basics, such as banking, budgeting, and savings. It will then move on to paying for college, navigating the financial aid process, appropriate use of credit, investment considerations, and managing debt after graduation. These sessions will also reinforce the parent's role as the primary financial behavioral model for their students. The seminars will take place at the library's Technology Center and at the 3 area Troy high schools. We've partnered with Oakland University, Walsh College, and GreenPath Debt Solutions to provide instructional support for this project. While the program is primarily directed at high school students and their parents, we will also create a website where session content will be posted, and thus the information will be available to the entire community. The program will begin in September of 2013 and run through June 2014. We hope to make it sustainable beyond that time frame, and we'll be looking for ways to do that. As you may recall, the library won another American Library Association grant in 2009 called Information Literacy for the Job Seeker, and the program that we pioneered is now in use at many libraries in this area. We hope to do the same thing with this program as well. Cindy Stewart in the Community Affairs Department will assist us by helping to promote the program through local media, Troy Today, and the city's website. And I would very much appreciate your help and support in promoting this program too. The library is also working with our valued partner, the Friends of the Troy Public Library, to offer scholarships for students who participate in this program that they can use to apply to their college tuition. I'm very excited to be able to offer Troy students and their parents the opportunity to participate in a program that will provide them with information they can use throughout their lives, whether it's saving for college, a home, a trip, or some other retirement goal. And we all know it's never too late or never too soon to start saving for retirement. I wish that we'd had a program like this when I was at Troy Athens High School. I might be retired by now. I look forward to working with our community partners, Oakland University, Walsh College, Green Path Debt Solutions, and the Troy School District to make this happen. With such great partners, there is an absolute guarantee of excellence. And I also look forward to demonstrating in a very visible way how the public library can change lives by offering programs like this. This broadens the definition of what a public library is and what a public library can do. And I really appreciate the opportunity to make this possible for the benefit of the Troy community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Congratulations for your team and all the hard work and getting that. That's awesome. You can hardly contain your excitement, can you? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone on council have any questions or anything? Mrs. Russ, thank you so much.
Mayor.
And again, congratulations. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, what was the total amount again? I
$65,175.
couldn't write fast enough. Thank you.
I talk fast.
Any other questions, comments?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. Our next presentation is on the Troy Transit Center, the monthly update from Glenn Lappin, our Economic Development Specialist. Hello, Glenn.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
In your agenda packets, you will see a memo from City Engineer Steve Van Dett, which brings you up to date on the construction aspects of the Transit Center. And in the next few minutes, I'd like to bring you up to date on some of the business opportunity aspects of the center. City management continues to work closely with the Troy Chamber of Commerce and marketing associates on identifying business opportunities for the Troy Transit Center. Meetings with local companies have begun in order to ascertain the level of interest in supporting business sponsorship opportunities at the Transit Center. Preliminary feedback has been positive. Follow-up contact with companies will be made to provide them with demographic data as a part of an offering prospectus. Demographic information is important in order for companies to determine market exposure for any potential sponsorship opportunities. Another determining factor for companies as they decide whether or not to participate in Transit Center sponsorship opportunities is interest in supporting community initiatives. Some companies view the Transit Center as another way to be supportive of community programs. This will certainly be a key factor for many companies as they make decisions related to participation. I'd like to share with you some of the demographic information that we are compiling for local companies. This will help give you an idea as to the type of passenger that might use the Transit Center, along with the potential economic impact. In 2011, an MDOT intercity passenger rail survey was conducted, which profiled each Amtrak station in Michigan. For the Birmingham station, which Troy Center replaces, the median age of the passenger was 44.4 years. 61% of the passengers were female, 39% male, and the median household income of the passenger was $81,300. About 54% of the passengers were employed full-time, 21% were students, and 3% were retired. 65% were Michigan residents. The primary reason why the passenger took the trip was to visit friends or family. That amounted to about 60% of those polled. 16% were traveling for vacation, and 11% were on personal business. Others were riding for business work purposes, going to or from college, which, as you know, there are many along the route, and for entertainment and shopping purposes. The study concluded that the Birmingham station generated over $2.8 million in economic impact in 2011. $47.08 in economic impact was generated on a per-passenger basis, and that does not include Amtrak expenditures. Another key focus for our team's efforts is to identify ways the transit facility can best link to the greater Troy hospitality industry. In March, our Transit Center Business Opportunities team will meet with the Troy Chambers Hospitality Committee. This committee consists of the area's major hotels, restaurants, and transportation providers. Opportunities for informational kiosks, reservation boards, shuttles, and advertising will be explored. And we are always available to answer any questions you might have. Steve Vendette is here as well to answer any questions on the memo regarding construction, and we'll continue to keep you informed as to the progress on the Transit Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Any questions? Okay, now for Glenn, any questions for Steve regarding the memo and the package? Steve, just for the public, if you could just, I've read the memo, I'm sure the entire council has, but would appreciate you just giving us an overview of that too.
Certainly will. Good evening, Council. As I indicated in my February status report, CN has imposed a new safety requirement, the addition of a crash wall on the west elevator tower on the Birmingham side. This wall will provide added protection to the tower and bridge support structures in the event of a train derailment. The wall is not needed on the Troy side because the entire bridge support elevator tower and building is located outside the CN right-of-way. It's needed on the Birmingham side because the tower and the bridge support is in CN right-of-way, and it is closer than 25 feet to the center line of the tracks. The safety wall will add added protection in case of a train derailment, and this wall is completely at the discretion of the host railroad, CN. It's based on their interpretation and application of ARIMA guidelines, and ARIMA is an acronym for American Railroad Engineering and Maintenance Association. During the 10 months of plan reviews and back and forth comments to and from CN, close clearance review, there was a close clearance review meeting with CN and MDOT, and the issuance of a close clearance report, no crash wall was required during that entire time. As I said, the wall is completely at the discretion of CN. MDOT and FRA have no power to intercede in this matter. Last Friday, the safety wall design details were reviewed with CN and our engineering architect team. And in accordance with the REMA guidelines, the wall will be 12 feet high, 2.5 feet thick, reinforced concrete, and 60 feet long. The safety wall will be incorporated into the wall of the elevator tower itself, and the architect engineering team is working to complete the design work and obtain CN approval and provide us with a cost estimate this week. The cost of the safety crash wall could be several $100,000. This wall is a significant scope change. It is not something that the construction contingency was meant for. The construction contingency is intended for unknowns that can occur during constructions, and in particular with underground construction, where there can be many unknowns with soil conditions and locations of underground utilities and all sorts of things. We are 15% into the project. We've got 85% to go, which is a long way. As you can see in your pictures, we've got foundations in, but that's about it. So we have a long way to go. And there is a need for the contingency dollars to cover any unknowns that may come up during the rest of construction. We've contacted MDOT about funding this scope change, and MDOT has agreed to work with us to work out details on amending our funding contract, which would apply some of the $2.2 million that we turned back to MDOT last October when the adjustment was made to the funding contract from the $8.2 million that we had down to the $6.2 cost of the project. The amendment may be ready for council consideration as early as March. And meanwhile, we will be hopefully receiving approval from CN on the crash wall design details, and we'll be making preparations for building the safety wall. After the wall construction, steel precast panels for the elevator tower will be erected on the west side. And this work is critical on the west side. It's being started first because large cranes are needed for setting the steel and the precast panels. And this must be done now while half of the high voltage lines are de-energized. And those lines must be turned back on by the end of May. So we are in a race against time to get all of that work, the tower work, I should say, done before the end of May. This concludes my presentation on the safety crash wall item. There's a lot more information in your status report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Dett. Just remain there if you could. There might be questions, but exit report. Before I speak, are questions from other council people? You've read the report. Questions? Councilwoman McGinnis.
I just had a question. What prompted reevaluating this to determine that there now needs to be the safety crash wall? Was there something that changed in the project, or is this?
Well, yes, there was. In fact, the FRA told us about a month ago. They said, go back and double check with CN and make sure that they are okay with no crash wall. And so we did that. We started that about a month ago. And it was about a week and a half ago that CN came back and said, you know what, you need a crash wall. So it was FRA that who had been party to this as long, for just as long as CN had, as far as the preliminary design report. No crash wall was required. It was not ever mentioned by CN, but it was FRA that said, go back and double check with CN to make sure it's not a requirement.
Councilman Henderson.
The fact that they didn't ask this a year and a half ago when we were really going through the battle on this is a little bit troubling. And in fact, they just decided that, hey, let's take a look at this. They'd never asked that question initially?
It was discussed, actually, at the what's called a close clearance meeting. It's a meeting with MDOT and CN officials. And the purpose of that meeting is to review all of the horizontal and vertical clearances of the bridge, the elevator tower, the bridge supports, the platform, all of those things. And that was all reviewed. A crash wall was discussed. It was not indicated during that meeting that it would be a requirement. It did not end up in the final close clearance report that MDOT prepared and distributed. So really at that point, which was back in June, I believe, of last year, we felt that we had clear direction as to how the clearances that were approved and how this project should be designed.
Question? Councilman Pennington.
Well, I guess if, is it a recommendation by MDOT or is it mandatory?
It is mandatory. MDOT and FRA do not have any authority in this matter. If CN says they want it, then it's got to be done.
When will we have the estimate of how much that wall will be?
It will be definitely this week. I'm hoping by the middle of this week we'll have it.
Okay. And then what do you think the chances of getting that money back from MDOT on the?
I think it's very good.
Okay, good.
Yes, very good.
Other questions? Councilman Henderson.
Two questions. When will we know for certain that MDOT's going to give us the funding for that? And if they say no, that then becomes a Troy resident liability?
I strongly believe MDOT will help with this, and based on my conversations that I've had with Therese Cody at MDOT, and I will certainly have another conversation with her tomorrow to even to try and solidify our understanding. But I believe when we get the estimate and we see where we are, and I can have another conversation with MDOT, I think we'll be well on our way to having a commitment from MDOT, although not in writing, but a commitment to use some of that funding.
Other questions?
Do you
Other
have another
questions?
one if somebody else?
But does this delay our target date on finishing?
It is, yes. We currently, the schedule is middle of July for opening. I think realistically we're looking at sometime in August, maybe middle to late August for opening.
Other questions here? Councilman Henderson again.
Last one. This additional is not covered under the contingency. Can you explain why that is? It just the size of the additional?
It's a scope change. It's a substantial scope change. It's not part of the original design, not part of the plans and specifications. The contingency is for unknowns that occur during the construction of the project as designed. This is a scope change. It's similar to saying, well, halfway through construction, let's add 10,000 square feet to the building. That's a scope change. This is a significant change in that it's changing the structure of the tower wall itself. It's the current tower wall is 13 inches wide. This is going to be 2 foot 6 inches wide. It's a substantial change in scope, not only in the thickness of the wall, but the foundation that's required for that wall as well. It is not something that the construction contingency is intended for. And in this case, I don't think it has the ability to cover that cost.
Interesting.
Any other questions? My comment, thank you for bringing us the report. I had no knowledge of this until I read this in the package on Saturday, but it's very thorough. I understand that CN is not being flexible on this at all. They have the final say, and they're mandating. What's important to me as a council person is that this does not cost the Troy residents, that this is something that's covered by the money that we can get back from MDOT. And I know you're working very hard to do that. I appreciate all your efforts. This certainly caught us all off guard, but these things happen. It's disappointing. I think that we did our due diligence. From everything I've read and been told, that there were numerous meetings, drawings were all signed off. CNN Railroad was a party to that, and this just totally caught us off guard. So the key is, I think, for us now, is to work very diligently to make sure that this does not cost the Troy taxpayers money. Unfortunately, we may have to dip into that 2.2 if we can get it back, but I'm glad we have that reserve available at our discretion. Thank you very much. Okay. Our next presentation will be made by Police Captain Robert Redmond. If he'd come to the microphone with your officers there. It's Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police Award for Excellence in Traffic Safety. Welcome, Captain Redmond, and your team. Thank you.
Good evening, members of council. In January 2011, the cities of Troy, Bloomfield Township, and Auburn Hills got together, worked out a program, and created what we call the South Oakland County Crash Investigation Team. The primary objective at the time was to improve the ability of the communities to get a group of accident investigators to the scenes of serious injury and fatal traffic crashes. Because when this type of accident occurs, typically we only have a couple people working. We would, in the old way, we would call in our rest of our investigators on overtime, try to get them to the scene as quick as we could, which would be an hour, hour and a half. By creating this team, we're using on-duty investigators. We call Auburn Hills, Bloomfield Township. They send the people that they have working, and that negates us having to call in people on overtime. It speeds the investigation, which then results in the quicker response to the scene, more complete investigation, and it speeds up the time. The most important thing sometimes is the amount of time the roads are closed in order to conduct that investigation. Actually, it was Auburn Hills who put together a write-up, presented it to the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, and the 2012 award for excellence in traffic safety was awarded by them to the Troy Police Department, and also the Auburn Hills Police Department and the Bloomfield Township Police Department. Clearly, there's a cost savings to all the departments involved in this. We don't call investigators in on overtime unless we have to if they don't have enough people on duty to help us. I think last year alone was about a $12,000 cost savings to the city of Troy residents by utilizing this program. And clearly, it's very hard to distinguish what the cost savings to businesses in the community by keeping the roads open and traffic flowing smoother. It's hard to track, but clearly that is there. So right now, I'd like to thank, I have 4 of the 6 current members. We have Officer Schultz, Officer Warzeka, Officer Schuler, and Officer Goldberg are all long-term members of the team. Officer Schultz is spending his last couple weeks with us as he submitted his papers to retire from the City of Troy Police Department. I've worked with Larry and Officer Schultz here in accident investigations for about the last 25 years. He is a qualified expert in accident reconstruction. He will be sorely missed. It takes a lot of work and training to get someone to his level. We have 3 guys standing here capable of doing that, and we're working on getting towards that goal. So I'd like to thank them profusely for their hard work. I'd like to thank the council for helping to make this happen. The other departments especially true, and I'll offer them, it's their award, it's not mine or ours.
Okay. Congratulations, guys. Thank you. Captain Redmond, thank you so much. This is just another way that we're thinking outside the box, working with communities, and this is excellent. So excellent job. Congratulations again to all of you.
Thank you.
You deserve
Thanks,
it. Thank you. Get a picture there. We have no carryover items, but we do have a public hearing, and we're going to have a presentation by our planning director, Brent Sadovit, before we open the public hearing. Mr. Sadovit, a lot of information to cover here, a lot of heavy reading. So I know you're going to summarize it for us.
I'm going to try to, Mayor Pro Tem
Thank you,
Fleming
sir.
and City Council members. As you're aware, the city adopted a zoning ordinance, a completely revised zoning ordinance in April of 2011. I forgot my clicker. Oh, no. And we essentially went from a 40-year-old zoning ordinance that was adopted to control growth to a brand-new zoning ordinance that was intended to encourage redevelopment and reuse. And it's common for municipalities, when they do adopt a new zoning ordinance, to take about 12 to 18 months after adoption to administer the ordinance and address any issues that come up as a result of the new provisions. And this is especially true when the new document is a comprehensive rewrite. So we knew going in there was going to be some changes needed. So city staff maintained a log of proposed revisions for the last 12 to 18 months. And this log was the basis of the text amendments that are before you this evening. The draft document was prepared with assistance from our planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. Ben Carlisle is here this evening to assist in answering any questions that you may have. In total, there are 12 substantive issues and 14 minor revisions that are proposed. The 14 minor revisions involve typographical errors and labeling errors, and we do not intend to discuss these this evening. They're so minor in scope, it's essentially general housekeeping issues. But if you have any questions on those 14, we'll be happy to answer them. So what we do is we intend to present the 12 substantive, that's a tough word, substantive issues to you this evening. Planning Commission vetted these amendments at 4 meetings, and they held a public hearing on this item January 8th, 2013. They recommended unanimous approval of the text amendment. The amendments are consistent with the City of Troy Master Plan, and specifically they further two very important goals that are listed in the Planning Commission, and that is creating an environment for investment and protecting single-family residential neighborhoods. Now, we recognize for those of us who don't work with the zoning ordinance on a regular basis, it does seem like a pretty significant list and maybe even overwhelming. I just want to stress there's no pressure to adopt these amendments this evening if you're uncomfortable with them, with just kind of the scope. If you have any questions during the presentation, please ask, don't hesitate. And if you'd like additional time to consider this, maybe at a future meeting, you can pump the brakes, and we'd be happy to consider this at a future meeting. So with that being said, I'd like to briefly summarize each of the 12 substantive changes. So, the first change involves parking in front of the building. Now, there are 4 districts, the community business, general business, office, and RC districts, where the new zoning ordinance does not permit parking in front of the building. Now, our zoning ordinance defines front of the building, there's a slide up here, as that portion of the building between the road and the very front portion of the building. So our new ordinance in those 4 districts does not permit parking. We got a lot of comments from the development community stating that it was very important to their businesses to allow at least some parking in front of the building to make it attractive and make people aware of the accessibility to the front of the business. So what we've proposed is allowing up to 50% of the required parking in front of the building. So in other words, if the required number of parking spaces is 32 spaces, you can park 16 in front of the building. And you can seek more. You can seek relief through what's called a sustainable development option, which is essentially a tool that's a give and take. It allows relief of the ordinance in trade for some sustainable elements on the site, such as low-impact stormwater system. The second proposed revision involves automotive and transportation uses in our integrated industrial and business district, which was our previous light industrial district. Specifically, there are 4 uses: vehicle repair, antique and classic vehicle sales, ambulance facilities, and vehicle rental. In our zoning ordinance, they're permitted subject to special use approval, which involves a public hearing and some additional standards above and beyond being permitted by right. So what we're proposing is to allow these uses by right in the IB district. However, if it falls within 300 feet of a residentially zoned or residentially used parcel, they would be required to seek special use approval. So that's put in there, first of all, to respond to the development community and allow greater flexibility, but also to protect abutting single-family residential neighborhoods. And here you see the table that we propose to be amended by replacing the uses permitted by special use by permitting the uses by right, which is indicated with a P. Mm-hmm. Third is extended stay facilities. Essentially, it's very similar to a hotel or a motel, but the length of stay is significantly longer. It presently is a use that's not listed in our zoning ordinance. There's 3, I believe, in the city, and they're non-conforming. So what we propose is allowing extended stay facilities by special use in the community business and office mixed-use districts, and allowing them by right in the general business and integrated industrial and business districts. This is consistent with the requirements for lodging or hotels and motels. The fourth is regarding oil change facilities. Presently, they're not listed as a permitted use in the zoning ordinance. So what we've done is we've treated them similar to vehicle repair, which is essentially auto body shops. But the secondary impacts of oil change facilities are significantly less than automotive repair shops. There's no storage of vehicles outside. It's essentially the customer drives up to the building, the door opens, they drive in, get the oil changed, door opens, they leave. Very, very low impact. So what we propose is allowing oil change facilities by right in the community business, general business, integrated industrial and business, and planned vehicle sales districts. Our fifth proposed revision involves wireless communication facilities. Presently, they're regulated, but they're not included in our schedule of regulations table that lists all the districts and all the uses. It's difficult to find, very confusing. So what we simply are doing is taking the provisions that are in the ordinance but kind of hidden and transferring them to schedule table, it essentially ends up permitting wireless communication facilities, which are antennas that they're permitted by right in all districts on existing facilities. And if someone is proposing a new structure, like an antenna structure, a pole, they're permitted by special use approval in a number of districts, but they're not permitted in single-family residential districts. Our sixth change, halfway there, Mayor Pro Tem Fleming, is adding lodging as a use group as a use in use group 5. These are in our form-based codes district. Presently, it's not listed. We're getting a number of potential applicants interested in putting hotels along our Big Beaver district, which is one of our form-based districts. We've been forced to kind of interpret that lodging as a permitted use, and what we're doing is simply clarifying that lodging is appropriate to be placed in use group 5. Our next requirement is regarding landscaping in our form-based districts. Again, the form-based districts include the Big Beaver District, the Maple Road District, and our 21 neighborhood node districts. Presently, the provisions in the code require 20% open space along the form-based districts. However, the form-based districts also require pedestrian and people space in front of the building. And it's difficult to meet the 20% open space when you also have to provide hardscape. So what we've done is kind of a compromise. You're required to provide 15% open space, but 25% of that requirement can be in the form of hardscape, such as benches, walkways, plaza areas, etc. Our eighth revision is regarding drive-through width. This is for drive-through stacking spaces. Our requirement is 12 feet. We find that 12 feet is too wide. It's not practical. The vehicles are moving so slow through the drive-through lanes. A parking space is 9.5 feet wide, so we felt it was appropriate to require a minimum of 10-foot wide stacking spaces. This is in response to developer concern that we're utilizing too much space for drive-through widths. Our ninth revision is regarding one-story buildings used for multifamily purposes in the IB districts. The IB district, it's Integrated Industrial and Business District. It is our most permissive district. There's a wide range of uses permitted by right. Essentially, all uses with the exception of single-family detached homes are permitted, but they also do not permit multifamily uses in existing one-story buildings. It's important to permit multifamily uses in these one-story buildings because, first of all, it provides more flexibility for reuse of the buildings. It provides alternative housing options, and it is one of the goals of the master plan to do so. So what we're proposing is for existing one-story buildings. They can be utilized for multifamily uses. However, if there's a vacant lot or a demolition and there's new construction, the only multifamily building permitted will be 2-story. So you can reuse an existing building 1-story, but if you build new, it's got to be 2 stories. Our 10th proposed revision is regarding outdoor special events. Presently, you can get a permit for 4 days, and for larger special events, if it takes 2 days to set up and it takes 2 days to break down, you can't hold the event. So Troy Family Days, as an example, over a long weekend. They used to have to seek a variance every year to allow the event to take place over 7 days. We felt it was appropriate to extend it to 7 days to allow for the 4 days for setup and breakdown. Our 11th revision is rezoning standards. We presently do not have any standards that the Planning Commission or City Council is to consider when contemplating a rezoning application, and we thought it was a good idea to include those, so it's in a public document and it's available for applicants, for council, for Planning Commission, or for any resident to see. Finally, our last revision is regarding frontage requirements. We used to have a provision in our older zoning ordinance that was interpreted to require that for single-family residential properties, if there was a minimum lot width requirement, it had to equate to the frontage requirement. What this means is, if you've got an existing subdivision, I've got a slide up here, and there's a cul-de-sac, or excuse me, a stub street that terminates. In order to utilize the property that's abutting it, you've got to extend the street so that the minimum lot width, we'll say 85 feet, the minimum lot width equals the frontage on the road. And this is consistent with the way the ordinance has been interpreted for about the last 50 years. It was an oversight, and it was not included in this rendition. With that being said, Mayor Pro Tem Fleming, that is my presentation. I try to keep it as brief as possible. I realize it's pretty significant, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent job. Questions from council?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes?
I have a question about number 1, which is the parking. I know that originally when we made the change to put all of the parking behind the buildings rather than the way that you see most of the parking lots structured in the city at this point with all the parking in front and the building set much further back, I thought that was in order to meet the goal of really setting up a different streetscape where you're going to see the buildings front and foremost, and it's really going to encourage walkability and much more pedestrian friendly. So I'm a little concerned with number 1 because it basically it was something that I think was very forward thinking, but it was designed in order for us to get this goal of having a totally different look where the business is front and center and it encourages that walkability. So I'm a little discouraged to see that we're going back on that, and I'm wondering if you can give us some insight. I'm sure that the developers may not like it. I don't know if you can give us a little bit more detail on what exactly their big concern is. I almost have a problem with it now being separated because you've got cars in the front, you've got cars in the back. So I think I personally would prefer to see it streamlined one way or the other, and of course my preference would be for all the cars to be in the back. So I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more insight onto that. I don't really want to just do it because people don't like it.
Sure. No, what I should have mentioned was, again, the districts that this would apply to is community business, general business, office, and research center. And what I didn't say in my presentation, I should have, was really where these properties are is along John R., some intersections along Maple and Rochester. And our goal when we adopted the comprehensively rewritten master plan was to accomplish some of the things that you referred to. What we found, though, is the unintended consequences is for those areas like John R., Maple, and some areas of Maple, and also Rochester Road, is in terms of development patterns, the die is already cast. And it's to such an extent that to require the parking, to not allow parking in front of the buildings now, really, it's going to take so long to kind of accomplish anything in terms of creating that relationship with the street, et cetera. Where it's really taken effect and where we apply it is in the form-based districts, Big Beaver, Maple, the neighborhood node. That's really where we're kind of focused our efforts on establishing the stronger relationship with the street, having the plaza area in front, getting the cars in the background. So I think the goal initially was to kind of apply it carte blanche, but we've realized that it's probably more appropriate to focus our efforts along those other form-based districts. That's kind of the response to your question. It's not just knee-jerk to the developers. There's so many non-conforming parking lots in the CB, GB, O, and RC districts. It's literally hundreds of properties that are non-conforming, and we really weren't getting a lot of bang for our buck in terms of how it's applied.
Just a follow-up.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, go ahead.
So it'll probably be more effective then to really focus it on certain areas where we'll be able to put all of our energy into getting the businesses that want to have that streetscape to go there. And then if there are other businesses that want to have something that's modified, they'll be able to look somewhere else. So I guess that makes sense. I just want to make sure that that's still our focus in those primary areas or the areas that we've always kind of envisioned that happening. And, if we were to try to enforce it in some of the other areas, it would take so long, if ever, to get them to look that way that it's probably not going to be effective. But I just want to make sure that that's still the priority for the areas. It
is absolutely the priority for Big Beaver, for Maple, and for the nodes. there are so many properties along in these areas, and they're relatively small. So even if you get, you know, a handful along a corridor, along a mile, there's really not a lot of, you really don't even hardly notice it. But that's the thought, is to focus our efforts on the Big Beaver Form-Based Code district, the Maple Road district, and the 21 nodes. And these other ones, the die's been cast, and the number of non-conforming lots today are just so high that there just didn't seem to be a lot of payback.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you. This is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this zoning ordinance text amendment? Mr. Peters?
Is my interpretation of this is that they're going to allow parking in the front of buildings along the main roads? Is that what you're saying? And so this is going to be kind of more like, I wouldn't say a strip mall mentality, but I just wondered if the aesthetic value of our city is going to be impinged here a little bit. That would be my comment on it.
Okay.
And, you know, more flowers, well, you know, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Anyone else like to speak in this public hearing? Not, the hearing's closed. We'll bring it back to the council table for a motion if we want, or discussion. I initially thought that this was something we should process tonight, and had a brief conversation with our planning director in the hall before the meeting tonight. But there's a lot of information here, and I read it on Saturday, feel pretty comfortable with it. It's gone through the Planning Commission, public hearing there. But I'm aware that two of our council people are not here. Our mayor is not here, and I was not aware that Councilman Teets was not going to be here. So I think there might be wisdom in delaying, but I'm open to whatever the rest of the council wants to do. Do I get a nod? Councilman Campbell.
I agree. I think there's a lot of stuff in there. I think we should, if we can, if we put it off for another week or 2 weeks, and everybody's back and have a chance to really go through this, I think it'd be well worthwhile.
Okay. Is that a consensus?
I would second that, yes.
Well, we're not going to have a motion. There's no motion, so this is just discussion. We will delay this item. We'll take no action on that item. City Attorney Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor. Because it was a public hearing, you probably should take some action and set a specific date. That can be a specific meeting, such as the next meeting, or it can be, upon, having a full quorum present or some other nature.
Okay. So do I have a resolution to move this, because there is a public hearing, move this until the next regularly scheduled meeting or a date certain?
Yes, I would make that resolution. The next meeting?
Okay. Councilman Campbell, have a second?
Second that.
Okay. Moved by Councilman Campbell that we delay this decision until the next meeting, seconded by Councilman Pennington. All in favor? Discussion first. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Well, I'll call the roll.
Call the roll. Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment for items that are on the agenda only. And there's one person signed up for that. I'm not sure if they still want to speak. That's Bruce Bloomingdale. You indicated you may or may not want to speak. Okay. No one wishing to speak on items on the agenda. So we'll move to no postponed items. We have regular business, board and committee appointments. On I-1, there are no mayoral appointments. There's one city council appointment. And I am moving the that Ken Voigt be nominated to serve on the Historic District Commission, term expiring March 1st, 2016, appointing that person. Do I have a second?
I support.
Support? Councilman Henderson. Discussion? Vote, Ms. Bittner.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
And Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
On I-2, there's a nomination open for mayoral nominations for Downtown Development Authority. I think we'll take no action on that, leave that for the mayor upon his return. There is one other opening due to a resignation that's on agenda item I-2B, Zoning Board of Appeals. We've had a resignation by Michael Bartnick, who resigned, who's moving out of the area. I've had one person contact me regarding an interest in this nomination, and that is Bruce Bloomingdale, who's currently serving on the ZBA as an alternate. So if council does appoint him, just to explain, I think he would have to resign that position, and we would have to fill that position if that's the action we decide to take. Am I correct, City Attorney Blum?
Yes, Mayor, that is correct, that because it's an alternate for a certain term. Now, the individuals who are alternates can serve during the absence of Mr. Bartnick in the interim until an official appointment is made.
Okay. But if I understand you correctly, we would need to have the resignation first before we could appoint.
That should probably be the direction.
Okay. I agree. Okay. So having that understanding, Mr. Bloomingdale, we certainly appreciate we'll get with you on the protocol for that. Resignation would be in order. So right now we have a full complement of people with the alternates. I appreciate your interest there, and we'll deal with that in due course then. Item I-3, no closed session. I-4, we have City of Troy investment policy and establishment of investment accounts. And I think we'd like to have a brief introduction by Tom Darling, Director of Financial Services, before we move on this resolution.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, what you have before you is the city's investments policy. It was originally adopted in 1999. The policy does comply in accordance with Public Act 20. As a matter of course, we submit this policy on an annual basis for City Council approval. The policy outlines and really confirms the priorities of the city's objectives and commitment to safety of principal, diversification, liquidity, and finally return on investment of the city's investments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Darling. It's a very thorough report, too. We saw earlier of all the places you're investing the money, so you're spreading it around quite a bit there, have potential to do so. Any questions of Mr. Darling before we have a resolution? Would someone like to move the resolution? Okay. Councilwoman McGinnis.
Resolve that Troy City Council hereby approves the investment policy and establishment of investment accounts as outlined in the memorandum and revised from Director of Financial Services Thomas Darling, dated February 12th, 2013, a copy of which shall be attached to the original minutes of this meeting.
Do I have a second?
Support.
Moved by Councilwoman McGinnis, seconded by Councilman Pennington, that we approve the investment policy and establishment of investment accounts as written here. Discussion. Vote, Mrs. Bittner.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes. Resolution passes. Next item is transfer of title for granted fund equipment, and that's going to be introduced by our Fire Chief William Nelson. Chief Nelson.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, brief background, Homeland Security funding started after 9/11, and basically the goal of that was to provide regional assets for emergency services, and they did a very good job of that. The problem is our government structure in Michigan doesn't allow for regional government. We've got state, we've got county, and we've got city, village, and township. So we received some grant equipment that was designed to be used by multiple fire departments, but we had to title it to a single municipality because there was no other option. In the course of this, we looked at creating an intergovernmental unit, if you will, under the Urban Cooperation Act, and it took us a couple years to get that done, but it now is up and running, and what we're proposing to do is transfer that asset to the intergovernmental unit, and they can assume the responsibility for it, pay the insurance, the maintenance, and all those things, and we just pay dues to that organization instead of having to carry the whole load of the equipment.
Thank you, Chief. Questions? Council, Chief Nelson? Thank you very much. Would someone like to move the resolution I-5?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilwoman McGinnis.
I will move the resolution as printed.
Have support?
Support.
Moved by Councilwoman McGinnis, supported by Councilman Pennington. Discussion? Vote, Mrs. Bittner?
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Resolution passes. Next, we have our consent agenda, J items. Is there anyone on council that would like to remove any of the consent agenda items for further discussion before we vote on them? If not, could someone move the,
I'll
okay.
move the resolution as written.
Councilman Campbell moves the resolution.
I support.
And supported by Councilman Henderson, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as presented. Discussion. The vote.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Thank you. There are no memorandums. We're now to public comment for items not on the agenda. We have just a few people signed up here. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So when I call your name, if you would come forward. You're all residents. And I'll remind you of the rules and procedure. I think we've all had good practice at this, and we know what those rules are, and just request that you adhere to those and keep this meeting civil, and I would certainly appreciate that. The first person signed up is Laura Belliet. Did I get your name right? You can correct me when you get up here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Laura Balliot, and I live at 965 Vanderpool, which is at Rochester Road, there where Dunkin' Donuts is and Akbar Produce. I live 3 houses in on that street. And it came to my attention maybe about 10 days ago that the owner of Akbar Produce is installing or has installed a live kill drain in his store with the city's approval, with the purpose that he's going to store live chickens there and kill the live chickens there. This is a residential area, and I'm concerned that this is really not very healthy. And this came right on the heels of one of our snowstorms, or large snows, and we were walking the dog in our driveway, and from around the corner comes a rat. I'm not good with rats. We cornered it, and we killed it with a rake, which is not an experience I would want anybody else to have to go through. They cry, they scream. Now, we know that we have rat problems in Troy, that they're coming in and they're moving in from other areas. Close by, Madison Heights has them. We know we've got them in our sewers. But now we're going to kill chickens, and we're going to put the debris into dumpsters. Now, this rat, when we chased it, or when we retracked it after we killed it, it came from a corner of that old Taco Bell there on Rochester Road, which is about probably 20 feet from the dumpsters for Akbar Food. The city of Troy has told the owner that, you know, he's setting precedent for other businesses that might want to do the same thing in the area, and that he needs to be a good citizen and keep things clean. I don't know how clean you can keep chicken refuge and chicken waste and those types of things, and I wouldn't want to buy food from inside the same place they store the chickens, and I certainly don't want them less than 100 feet from my house in an outside chicken coop. The fences are not there. They don't have rat walls, and they don't have rat walls because they are grandfathered in under other agreements from long ago. And the walls that he does have, the wooden ones, are not maintained. The city has issued a bunch of violations. He has yet to act on them. But it isn't just me who's got permit, you know, that's affected here. It's a whole residential neighborhood. This encourages rats. And there are other meat markets. And there's Peacocks. There's Whole Foods, for all I know, and others. And they need to, they will be, if he sets a good example, and I don't know how long a good example is. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
We will address this later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next resident is Mr. Richard Peters.
Evening, Mayor, Council, folks, the people of Troy. I didn't really want to come tonight, but the economy's kind of got on my mind here a little bit. I would hope that, you know, because these high gas prices are affecting, and I'm sure they'll be affecting the city again, that maybe the Attorney General will take a look at the energy companies and maybe the brokerage firms to see if there's any collusion going on there. Also, we have some holes in our, somebody was talking about the roads. I'm just wondering if there's a pothole problem in our city. I noticed, I don't know if I was in the city or not, I noticed there's a few of them around, and I'm sure, you know, maybe the people will be hearing about that. And let's see what else. There isn't too much else. I got too much. I hope that the President and the Congress could work together to get the economy. I don't think we need another recession here. I don't think it'd help our people, both domestically or nationally, etc. So, you know, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. James Savage, resident. Welcome, Mr. Savage.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. I'm looking at Troy Gazette, February the 11th. Council explores the wish list. And I'm wondering, you know, what are we running here? A city or a nursery school? With the exception of the transit center, this is the same old wish list that we have had for 15 years or more. Whoever wished for the transit center should take notice of the empty 40-seater smart buses that drive around town. Then there's the Vision 2020. Every resident should read it and now ask themselves, after over 6 years and halfway through the program, what have we achieved and what was the point of it anyhow? And this is the 2020 program. I've read it. I don't get it. There's one sentence that's missing right at the end. And they all lived happily ever after. It's like a nursery rhyme. And by the way, Detroit has a similar, the Big D 2020 program. And let's look where they are. Our program costs somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. I'm not sure where, but it's in that range. And who knows what the Detroit program cost. For years, I have brought to the attention of council many programs that could easily be fixed, not for me personally, but for the common good. So let's stop the studying and the wishing and focus not on our wishes, but on our needs and get the job done. My priority would be safe pedestrian access to and from schools, and the old program, which was from about 8 years ago, the City Center Park, which has not moved. And my personal wish was to get my 5 minutes speaking time back that this council took away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savage. Next speaker is Mr. Dan Brake, resident. Good evening, Mr. Brake.
I came with 3 minutes prepared to mostly encourage you to reconsider your appointment of Dane Slater. I arrived too late to hear why he's not here tonight, and I hope he's well. I want to speak to something else that you brought up tonight, so let me try to summarize what I had to say about that in a minute or so. He is your appointee, and the city charter and your rules of procedure let you undo decisions you've made and remake them. There is still time to do that, and I urge you to consider it without waiting for the May election. The causes I've gone into here before, but I'll remind you as quickly as I can. He manipulated your votes, and he manipulated the information that was available to you at the time you were considering his appointment. The city attorney participated in that manipulation by withholding information from you, by withholding documents, and ultimately by lying to you more than once. I hope that's still on your minds because we haven't forgotten it. What I want to turn to, though, is this question of the transportation center suddenly having a major scope change. You, Mr. Fleming, as you well know, were the swing vote. You have to know you're going to hear about this. When the scope was changed from $8 million to $6 million, you agreed to support it, and that's why we have it today. Now we hear that from suddenly out of nowhere, there's this multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars increase. And you, sir, here this evening said, well, at least it's not going to come out of our Troy taxpayer pocket. It's going to come out of some other Michigan or U.S. taxpayer pocket. Our point from the beginning was that it's all our money and it shouldn't be wasted. And yet here we are with, it can't be called a camel's nose under the tent, it's a dragon's nose at the very least. How could we have entered into a contract that lets another party to the contract insist on a scope change of this magnitude and leave us stuck with the bill? Us, whether it's Troy or Michigan or the United States taxpayer, it all comes out of the same place in my pocket. I hope you don't let this go so lightly as it appeared that you were going to let it go tonight. There's some serious questions for your city staff about how we got into this situation. I hope you ask them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brake. The last speaker we have tonight is Mr. Ron Butterball. Good evening, Mr. Butterball.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'll be very, very brief. Over the weekend, I had an opportunity to pull out of my mailbox the Troy Today newsletter, a city publication that I've read for 30-plus years. It was very, very exciting to see more than 5 pages of business development news in that newsletter. That's wonderful. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens because people work together. And I think everyone at this table, from Aileen on the left all the way around to Tom on the right, should take credit for that, should be proud of it. It only happens by government and the city and the council and everyone working together. and that's a wonderful accomplishment. I applaud you for it. This city is moving in the right direction. I applaud the cooperation that I've seen here tonight and that I've seen for the last several months. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes those that had signed up for public comment for items not on the agenda this evening. Now's the time for council response to public comment. I have one item. Does anyone have another item they'd like response on? Okay. I'd like to, for Mr. Miller, if he would, and I know he's putting you on the spot here, or maybe Mr. Kishnick. I did have a conversation with our first speaker a week ago, I believe, regarding this incident with the rat and so forth. And Mr. Kishnick, you put out a letter to council in your weekly report. But I think just for the public, we need to summarize what action we've taken and what has transpired since I reported that to Mr. Miller, who took pretty immediate action, I believe.
And since Mr. Miller was the lead on that, I'll let him respond.
Thank you.
Members of council, yep, you referred a nice woman in the audience to me and her name, and I referred Paul Evans, our zoning and compliance officer, to investigate the situation, and they did send ordinance enforcement officers to the area and found that they couldn't find visible signs of rats in any ways of evidence. However, they did see building conditions which could contribute to rats, so they issued violations. I don't know the properties off the top of my head right now, but they did issue a number of violations to correct those issues. And the live chickens were approved through the building department, and there was a waste disposal process agreed upon, and they meet all codes and health codes related to that.
Okay. Just to follow up there, I think the concern that the resident was that they were going to be throwing chicken parts in the dumpsters and so forth. It was going to contribute to the rat problem, but that's been addressed?
There is a waste disposal plan which was approved, and I don't know that off the top of my head. What we can do is provide a written response exactly what that process is, because I think it includes wrapping it, freezing the waste until it's disposed.
Gotcha.
They're not permitted to put the wastes into the garbage, but I want to find out exactly what that method is.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for following up on that and for giving the report.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else in public comment? City Attorney Bloom.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind council and also the persons in the audience of the rules of decorum, one of which is that speakers should also be careful to avoid saying anything that would subject them to civil liability, such as slander and defamation. And I just wanted to put that on the record, since I believe that that possibly occurred tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. No council referrals. Any council comments at this point? Councilman McGinnis.
It's really brief, actually, because Mr. Butterbaugh stole my thunder, but I wanted to just point out, I just wanted to point out to everyone in the audience and people watching at home that the Troy Today did arrive in your mailbox for the spring 2013 issue, and Cindy Stewart and all of the staff that work on this did a terrific job. There's wonderful information in here, not only about economic development. This is where you would go to find information on road projects, things that are going on at the museum, the nature center, and obviously all of the programs that are going on with Parks and Rec are in here as well. So if anyone saw this come in their mailbox, they want to check it out from cover to cover. It is a wealth of information. So thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Butterbaugh.
Any other comments? Reports. We have some excellent reports in this agenda package, very detailed reports. The first one I've talked to the chief briefly about was a 2012 year-end calls police service report. Now, that's very detailed. I encourage you to read it, but I've asked the chief if you wouldn't mind just to give us the highlights of that report. Thank you, Chief.
Certainly, Mayor Pro Tem and Council.
As Mayor Pro Tem Fleming indicated, it's a very detailed report. It's a little light reading if looking for something like that. My intent would just be to go over some of the highlights of the report, which is that our Group A crime, which are what people tend to think of as the major crimes, decreased 3.2% from the 2011 level. We saw a decrease in our assault, breaking and entering, which are home invasions, and commercial breaking and enterings, and our sex offenses. We saw decreases in all those areas. We also saw increases in drug and narcotic offenses and weapon law violations, which I'll explain a little bit later. While it's not good to have those increases, it shows some other good behavior on the part of the police officers. We had a slight increase in our Group B crimes, which are crimes that are not as serious. That includes crimes like drunk driving and other misdemeanor offenses. Our total incidents of crime increased by 6 incidents compared 12 to 2011. So that's less than 0.1%. The Operations Division of the Police Department continues to show its traffic safety commitment. As you saw tonight, we're very, very traffic-oriented in the City of Troy Police Department because we think it helps keep down other crime by having officers out there making traffic stops. If someone's traveling through the city with an intent to do another crime, they tend to see the police officers on patrol. They know they're there. It's good to have high visibility like that. Our number of drunk driving arrests is the highest level we've had in the last 5 years, with a significant increase of 13.7% over the previous year. Liquor law violations increased. Total number of traffic citations increased, and total arrests have increased by 12.9%. All these increases are a direct result of our police officers increasing their self-initiated activity. So in other words, we have less police officers, but we have more activity by the police officers. That's because the officers realize they got to get out there, and the technical term in law enforcement is shake the bushes, find things that are going on. So we have increases in things like firearms violations and narcotics violations because police officers are making more stops, investigating suspicious people, and getting that contraband off the streets. In July of this year, the CQ Press released annual city crime rankings, and the City of Troy was ranked the 3rd overall safest city in Michigan and the 36th safest city overall in the United States. We've achieved the safest city ranking as high as 5th and 6th in the United States in 2006 and 2005. In fact, other than the current year in 2009, we've been among the 25 safest cities in America. This shows a significant and long-term commitment on the part of the City Council, the city, the citizens that live here, the police department, groups like the Troy School District, the Troy Community Coalition, and everyone coming together to address this problem. So we're very proud of the actions of the police department and everybody that we serve.
Good job, Chief. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions, Council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other reports Council would like to hear in more detail? If not, there are no study items. There's no closed session. I would like to mention that there is a meeting Wednesday night, the liquor advisory violation hearings on February the 20th, regular meeting here, so we'll need to be back in council chambers this Wednesday night. No further business. Meeting's adjourned.